Hello, and welcome to Morph Minutes, presented by Studio M Financial. Studio M Financial exists to help you change the sound of your money through financial education and coaching. I am your host, Katrina Pitts, instructor and financial coach. Hi friends, it's Katrina again, and welcome to the third episode in our Your Money Mastering Summer Series. Really glad to have you here. Today we're going to talk about preparing ourselves for our kids to go back to school. So let's start off with our usual disclaimer, and then we'll jump right in. So our disclaimer for this session is the views and opinions expressed by Studio M Financial representatives are not those of the representatives and do not necessarily reflect the views of Studio M Financial or any of its officials. The information provided in this presentation is for general educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as legal, financial, or individual counseling advice. Participating in the Your Money Mix series or these Your Money Mastering sessions does not establish a financial coach-client relationship. Let's look at our summer series. Today is our back to school, help me get ready. So we're going to talk about back to school resources, kind of planning for that coming, because we're in June right now. This podcast is going to come out in July, but we're in June right now, towards the end of it. So it's going to be a couple weeks. So we're getting ready. August will be here before we know it. So I actually adjusted the timeline a little bit because you'll see June, July, August. I adjusted a little bit to kind of get information out a little bit sooner for people. So when they're listening, they can have another month or so to kind of plan for it and kind of get a little bit of a jump start. So today is our back to school, help me get ready, and then we'll have another one here coming up in a couple of weeks. So our session objectives, we are going to identify resources for back to school items. We're going to analyze our budget impact for back to school needs. So we'll take a look at some numbers and see how we can make some things fit and put that puzzle together. And then we're going to look ahead to planning for upcoming school sessions, or school seasons. And some of this is going to be things that we know and things that we don't know, and how do we kind of take those into consideration. So first, what does my student need? That's a great place to start. So for every kid, and really for every district court, there will be nuances and some slight differences. But for the most part, the things that your student is going to need will fall into one of these four buckets, if not 4, 3 or 4, or whatever the combination is. So for uniforms, there's going to have to be some sort of uniform or clothing. You could probably put that just as a general category as well. And then there's some after-school activities and field trips that they're going to be wanting to participate in, go to the zoo, go to a museum, go to some, a farm for kind of a biology, or not biology, but animal experience or what have you. Supplies that they're going to need, pencils, markers, computers, laptops, if they aren't provided by the school. And this is sort of food and nutrition, whether that's lunches or after school, needs that they're going to need for their after school activities, or if they are students who do a lot of athletic activities. So if they are a travel team for football or for baseball or for basketball, which I know is coming up here, we'll get into basketball season for kiddos, during the school year. But if there's any sort of nutritional needs that they are going to need as a result of that, or you could actually probably put in that after school activities and field trips, you may also kind of bucket in the travel, what they do for their travel ball teams. So that may actually be another one that we could consider. But for the most part, these 4 things that are maybe specifically to their school day are things that they're going to need. So clothing, some activities, supplies, and then food and nutrition for your kiddos. And that part in the middle is what's the actual budget that may be necessary. And that number is a bit of a range. And at the bottom of this slide, you'll see some of the sources that were pulled for that. And there's hyperlinks, so you can pull those resources and review those articles yourself. But there's a bit of a range for $600 to maybe somewhere close to $900 per student in order to supply some of these needs. So if you have, 2 or 3 children who are school age, so kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, then you're going to have to factor that by 2 or 3 or 4 or however many kiddos you have, to the extent that they aren't paying for things themselves. And we'll get to that here in a little bit later on in the podcast. But $600 to about $900, which is a pretty eye-popping number for basic things like clothes and supplies, and we're going to feed them and some after-school activities. But that can be pretty burdensome on a family if there's, if there are multiple kids, and if it just sort of takes us by surprise. So the purpose of this podcast is to really kind of get ahead of that. So if we know these things are coming, how can we best prepare and plan for them? We still may not, we still may have to figure out where the money is going to come from and how we're going to allocate that. But at least we have our eyes wide open that there are going to be responsibilities and needs that our kiddos are going to need for their school year, because we want them to have a great school year, have a great experience as students, and as they're going through their education with their friends and their teachers and all that sort of stuff, and doing fun activities. But from a budgetary perspective and kind of sleeping at night, we want to kind of have a forward thinking perspective of this. So when we're planning the budget, there's a lot of words on this slide, but I'm going to kind of take it piece by piece. So let's start on the left-hand side with monthly deposits. So if you are thinking about how you want to position your finances for this very specific thing, which is how are we going to take care of our students' needs throughout the school year and just for the school year, if it helps to actually set a separate student fund in a separate bank account or in a linked bank account that you can just easily transfer money into if you don't want to make the official, kind of hard deposits, or hard withdrawals from your check, that you can do through your employer. They can sometimes, I know I've done this in the past, where they just take a chunk of money out of my check and they'll just deposit straight into a savings account that I've designated. If you don't want to go that route, you really just kind of want to have the ability to manipulate that yourself. So your whole check goes into your checking account, or your joint checking account, or an individual one, and then have a separate deposit that you manually do, or that you have auto draft from your regular operating account into this school fund, then maybe that's an option for you. So you really can keep a closer eye on that particular budget and that part of your budget. It's a lot of money to figure out where it's going to come from and to know how it's actually playing into from your operating account. So where your groceries and your normal household goods and paying all of your bills, if it's helpful to set a separate one aside, and I definitely encourage you to do so. It's pretty easy to set up bank accounts now with your normal banks that you can do, and sometimes you can have as many as you want, and you can link them, especially if you stick with the same bank. So it's pretty easy to do. Separate debit card for that as well, for you to be able to keep track of those specific expenditures. So deposit regular amounts from operating account to the school account. That is if you want to go this route. If not, then really you're going to have to be mindful of those receipts and that line item in your budget. So when you're actually setting it up every month and you're looking ahead to what you have. So right now we're in June, but when you see this and hear this, it's going to be July. So towards the end of July, when you look at your budget for August, you go, okay, there's a line item that is school related. So every month we're going to put in $300 or $400 for school expenditures, and that's what we're going to keep track of. So when we have a receipt, for uniforms, because we go to the store to, or the school to pick up the packet of uniforms that we have requested or ordered. And sometimes you order those before you even get to the school year. Sometimes you order them when the student, ends that prior year. So if you have a third grader going into fourth grade, sometimes you may purchase those uniforms at the end of their third grade year, so they're ready for their fourth grade year. So if that's the case, and you kind of, you're planning a little bit ahead, and we'll kind of get through that for the school year kind of part at the bottom. But when you make those purchases, that's the line item that you're deducted from. So out of that $400 that we put aside, you've spent $33 or $58 or whatever the number is, and we're start kind of deducting it that way. Whichever way is easier for you. If it's too cumbersome to set up a separate account, and then you have your line item in your budget that says this is designated for school, this is the amount, and we'll deduct our expenses from that. And then you use that school fund, or you track those expenses in that particular line item on your budget for the school related expenses. So you can really kind of get a handle on how much you're actually spending, because maybe you're not sure how much you should set aside. And going back to look at prior budgets really isn't helpful, because it's really not laid out that way. And maybe you don't really have time. You're just we're in the moment and we're getting ready to spend the money. And so we just kind of have to do it. Either way, that's fine. But we at least kind of need a level set on where we are and kind of devise a plan. And if we need to work the plan as we are devising the plan, then that's perfectly fine also. But as long as you have a good idea of where you are. So monthly deposits, or we're tracking our expenses. So let's go to look to the one that's right underneath that. So we have an activity cap. So that seems very restricted. That seems no, I would never do that. But maybe you decide, you know what, we're really going to be intentional with the time that we allocate for activities that our students have outside of school, or what they do in school. Maybe we choose we're only going to do, of the 8 things that are available, we're going to do 6 of those things. And if those other 2 that we do aren't, for our after school, so we just have childcare for that or alternatives for that, we're just not going to pay the money for it because we're really managing our expenses and there's other things that we're looking at, then maybe that's an option. If not, that's fine also. But at least you know that you have control over how this goes down in your personal budget, your household expenditures, your household budget. You have control over this. So if you want to set a number of cost-based activities for your student to participate in through the year, you can. Or alternatively, and we're going to go to the right column, so spending cap, if you want to set a certain amount that you're going to spend each month for the school-related things or for that year. So for the year, we are going to spend $1,000 and we're going to track that and see where we are. And so we're making the decisions of we're spending this $300 now for this, which means that's $300 less that we are spending for the year because we're really, really trying to track that because we're saving for college, we're saving for purchasing a home, we're saving for, another major expenditure for the year. So we're really trying to keep track of our expenses and manage those the best way that we can. So either an activity cap that we know there's cost base, or we are setting a spending cap. So we're only going to spend this amount of money each month or this amount of money for the year. And we are budgeting out of that particular bucket. However you want to do it, perfectly fine. But also I would say this is kind of a key part here as well. We're going to keep our family in mind. So how do all those activities impact the experience of our family? And how do the activities benefit our student? Are they educational, are they social, are they leadership, or their physical activities, or their athleticism, and all those things that we are developing for them, and team elements to this that we're learning how to work together as a team. We're learning what it means to be a team, especially if you're talking about your first grader, second grader who's starting in soccer and they're really kind of, wobbly on how this team thing works. But really, what are we, I don't want to make it super clinical of what are we trying to accomplish here, but really, what is the purpose for this and how is this impacting our family? Because someone's going to have to take them, someone's going to have to pick them up, someone's going to have to pay for this. There's all these different things that we have to keep in mind and to be aware of when we're making these choices of what our students do and what our kiddos do. So how do they impact our family experience? Are they taking them away from family time? Are they adding to? Is it something everybody can enjoy? Or, our families are kind of going in multiple directions and that's not really what we want to do. Or we recognize that that's a possibility. So that's kind of where we are. Really just thinking through those discussions, and that kind of can factor into how we set that up. And so then that last part is we're going to plan for the entire school year. And you say, Katrina, I'm really barely struggling to plan for this one month. So you really want me to look at the whole school year? Yes, I do. Trying it. And this is one of those things that, looking at every year, we know that there are certain things that happen every time, the exact time every year. Birthdays, anniversaries, different milestones that we are hitting, holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, all those happen at the exact same time every single year. There's no variances. We don't change birthdays every 2 to 3 years. We don't change holiday. We don't move Halloween from, October to June just for kicks and giggles. We know it's going to happen. So sometimes we can plan for those things, even though we don't think we can plan for those things that take a much longer perspective, much longer view of that. So I kind of want to think about it this way, but think about planning for school the same way, thinking about it as the whole year. So this goes back to a second ago when I said maybe you buy your uniforms at the end of the school year for that student in preparation for the next school year. Well, maybe adding that kind of on the tail end of those expenses for that year because you're planning for the next year. So what are we doing? What are those activities? What is the teacher and that parent teacher night? What is your student brought home from the first day of school? The different things they're going to be doing. What questions can we ask our teachers of kind of what's the plan for this year? What do you think we're going? What do you think you're doing? When do you think those things are going to happen? So I can sort of plan for that. So I am not caught unaware as a parent. My kid is not caught unaware as a parent. So we kind of know when those things are happening because you also have permission slips that are going to be due. And so the worst thing is when your student says, Mom, your kid says, Mom, I have, we didn't sign the permission slip. Permission slip for what? Oh, we're supposed to go to, this particular museum and we need to do this for the ride of the bus. Well, I didn't know about that. How am I just not finding about that? You kind of take away those anxiety-filled moments of just knowing when those things are going to happen, or approximately when those things are going to happen. Because, things change. Sometimes the teacher has a tentative plan, things move around because of availability or timing or whatever. Those things are perfectly acceptable and we roll with them. But to the best that we can, kind of get a forward view of what's happening for the school year. So we gather the information from the school and from the teacher about upcoming cost-based activities. So this is going to be $20. This is going to be $50. This is going to be $200. This is going to be $10, whatever. And it's without food, or this is with food. So you can kind of planning what you're going to need in terms of those resources. And then you track those expenses and you can plan for future years easier. This is all about smoothing and evening out our planning for these really, really big expenditures. Especially if you have multiple kids going in multiple different directions. How do we keep this all together and make it make sense for a very, very busy and active family? So we're done planning it. This goes a little bit to how does this impact our family? So really family buy-in for this. And this is an opportunity to have really good and healthy discussions about money with school age kids. And I know sometimes those things feel very challenging or unfamiliar or a little clunky with how do I explain money to my 8-year-old, or how do I explain budgeting and to my 10-year-old without them feeling like we never get to do anything, Mom, or you're always telling us no, Dad. What's your are reasonable and appropriate concerns, because those things certainly translate into how your kids handle money, because they're observing and they're taking in some of that those emotional responses that we are having. Sometimes they take those things in and internalize those, and then they just sort of bring themselves to bear when they get older and have their own money. That can build in some negative money habits. So how do we have positive money discussions with our school age kids? Things about what do our kids really want to do? How do they really want to spend their time? I've had a couple of different clients over the last couple of years who have very busy kids, and they're talking about, we have camps for this and camps for that, and they're in this kind of athletic course. They're taking these lessons for here. And I said, and the parent was expressing that there were some, sort of budgetary and financial concerns of, this is really expensive, that's really expensive. And so I just asked the question, does your kid want to do these things? And, are they involved in this? Are they enjoying this? And it was kind of a moment of, I don't know, let me ask my kid. We've just been doing this. And so we just do it every year. It's kind of an auto thing that we do. And so they went back and asked their kid, who was old enough to articulate what they did and didn't like. And it come to find out, they didn't like this one particular thing that actually was a good bit of their budget. And she said, well, we just stopped that. That was easy. She didn't want to do it. We didn't want to pay for it. So we just cut that out, and it was great. So kind of having those discussions of, what do they want to do? How do we do this? Okay, hey, we're planning for this as a family. We want to do this. How, we are trying to be stewards of our money the best way that we can. So help us do that. Talk to us about this, because we want you to enjoy your school year, but we also want to make important and quality financial decisions. So how can you help us do this? Tell us of this list, or you make a list of things you want to do, and you tell us the top 3 or the top 2 things that you really want to do this school year that you want to be involved in. And then we can kind of figure out the money part from there. And then what investment or responsibility does a student have? So I said earlier, for those age ranges from K through 12, and I said it to the extent that that student is not paying for their own things or starting to pay for their own things. So that really is how are we sort of maybe releasing the responsibility for those things a little bit to our older kids, especially if they're late high school getting ready for college and they're starting to build their own financial experiences and building those financial habits. So what investments do we need, and how do we communicate that to that student and that kiddo? This is now yours. You are a working person. You're now responsible for your after school involvement for school, or your after school involvement in activities, or you're now responsible for whatever sort of snacks and food that you all have after practice, right? We're not going to give you the extra $40 for you to go to fill in the blank place for your after practice. Those are things that you are now responsible for. If you're not working and that's what you want, you're not working that day, you don't have a shift that day, and you want to go out, okay, then that cost is now on you. So kind of finding those places of we're discussing this in a healthy way so you understand money comes in, money goes out, and you have the opportunity to decide where that money goes and how that money is spent. So really kind of bringing that family in and starting new family financial traditions can really be powerful and really be, kind of a delightful discussion, because so much of our personal money discussions are kind of in shadows and veiled or not done at all, or we're seeing and we're observing different things. And so now as the parents, you have a really great opportunity to set a different tradition for your family of how we talk openly about money, how we speak openly about responsible decision making. Even if you have done made poor decisions and done poorly with your money up into including that day, this is an opportunity to start and make a different decision to set your family on a different track. So get family buy-in. Now, if there are other things that you need in the community that have a gap that you need filled, where do I find uniforms? Where do I find these kind of after school cares? Where do I find low cost things? Because our kids are grown and it doesn't make sense for me to outlay an outrageous amount of money when they're going to grow out of them in approximately 4 months. And it's a 1 year use and we can't use it again. So if we need those kind of lower cost, lower budgetary, impactful places, absolutely explore those. Now, I live in the Dallas area, so some of these I pulled directly from Dallas directory. So some of this may not be helpful for people who live nationwide, but these bottom two links here, and it's also linked in the presentation, so you can be able to pop it out. So this comprehensive list of other community activities and this Find Help Search website. Both of those are aggregators for nationwide resources that are available. So whether that's community resources, church resources, any sort of citywide initiatives that are taking place within the community, you should be able to find those there. So just type in your zip code, hit send or search, and it will give you a roster of places, links to their website, any reviews, any sort of detail and foundation or background information they can give you. You can be able to find that there. These 4 or 5 that are here at the very top of the list are links to these organizations that are listed here. So Metro Crest Services, links to that. The Friendship House, links to that. Food is Now Served is there. Safe Haven, Berry Goodbyes, and then the Now Forward. And they all provide different resources for that grid that we showed earlier. So clothing and nutrition and after school activities, made lesser so explicitly, but maybe financial assistance for some things. And then we had clothing, housing, and supplies. That's the other one, supplies. So all of those in some way can help meet the needs of those 4 or 5 things that were listed on that. So that's also why they were chosen, kind of give a smattering of the local community partners that help to do that. If there's a gap that we need to fill, and that's okay too, how do we fill the gap? Instead of just saying there's a gap, what are the resources that are available to do that? Some require applications, some have appointments that you will make. So if you're going to do it, know the information, know the time frame, know what's the requirements, know what documentation that you're going to need, and search out those community partners and make it happen. So goal opportunities, because we want to take information and we want to take action from this. So we need to devise a plan. So we can look and say, we know we have these particular, or maybe we don't even know what expenditures we have. Let's take a look at this. We're going to need supplies, and sometimes school districts, and for parents who have multiple kids who are older and you're kind of accustomed to this and used to it, and it's just kind of autopilot for you. Your school districts, they have these resources, what uniforms, what school supplies, what types of pens and pencils, all the different things that you're going to need, tissue and hand sanitizer, whatever the school supply list is. Sometimes it's provided by the actual district's website. Sometimes you can find it for the specific school when you register your kids for school. However you can locate it, and then starts checking, what do we need? We have plenty of these. We bought 1,700 of these last year and we have about 500 left. Okay, great. We have place. We don't need this. We don't need this. We need this. We need this. Okay. Now we know what we need. How are we going to pay for this? Okay, so we either have a separate account, we have a budget, our line item in our budget, we've set the amount, We now have a plan, and so now we have to execute this. So when is tax-free weekend going to be? When do we need to actually start making deadlines and saying we need to have these things by this date? So that when it comes time for the first day of school, we have what we need to the degree that we can. Obviously, those expenses that are more future forward for those activities and field trips, right? We're planning for those things. We know that they are coming. We're planning for them. But for what we need for the first day, first week of school, how can we plan for that? And the method am I going to use to pay for these? Again, separate account or line item in our budget. How are we going to do this? And then our family involvement. Who are the stakeholders? Who do we know who's involved in this? Have we accounted for all of the cute heads that are in this family, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to do the things they want to do, that we know what it's going to cost, that every voice has been expressed and every voice has been heard, and we've allocated for that. What are the impacts on our family and our schedule? How does it work with our work schedule? How does it work with our other activities? What we do for as a family, whether that's we go see family a lot, we travel, or we go to church, and we have church a couple of different times a week, Sundays and Wednesdays for various things. How does this actually fit into our family and fit into our lives? And then necessary resources. So I need to figure out what gaps do I have. So then I need to figure out what the information is to find those gap fillers, to find those resources. Where can I locate them? Who has them? Refer you back to that previous slide where we listed the people or list the organizations, links to their website to be able to find those places. And obviously Google is a great resource for it. Any sort of search engine can help you find that as well. So goal opportunities. What's my plan? How am I going to do this? Is our family, fully engaged in this and taking it into account? And then what do I need in order to make this happen? So then we're going to continue our action steps. So these are a little bit repetitive from the previous one, but I think I just jumped ahead of myself also because I already mentioned that take advantage of tax-free weekend. But if you make an appointment, you're going to need to show up. If there's an application, fill it out. If you need to make a visit in person, go see the people, do what you need to do in order to actually make this happen so that your kiddos can have a great school year, so that you as a family can have a great school year. That's the frenetic nature of it is reduced ideally, because again, we're smoothing these things out. So whatever is the unpredictable, that unpredictable is a pretty short list of things. And we have resources to cover the unpredictable nature of those things that we need to take care of. So those are the action steps that we are going to take. Assess our school needs, do that checklist, look to see what we need, assess the resources. Where are they coming from? Is this coming from home that we are supplying these needs? Are they coming from the community? What's the scheduling? What's our deadlines? What are we actually working with? How does this fit with our family? What resources do I need if they're not taken care of at home? And then whatever it is that you've applied for, that you have made the appointment for, I say it again, show up, because there's other people that are looking for those resources as well. So if you sign up and you don't go, you have now taken the place of someone else who would have signed up and who would have gone. So make sure that if you do it, that you follow through on what you have committed to do. And have a great school year. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. And if you want a connection, if you want to ask questions, or you have any follow-ups, or you have your own resources, I am not the source of all resources. So if you have resources that you've used as a parent over the years that have been really, really beneficial to you getting ready for school year, then please, please, please let us know about it and share it in the chat so that other people can read it, other people can see it, and they also be aware of the great resources that are available in their respective cities. So if you're living in Nebraska, or you're living in New Jersey, or you're in Florida, or you're in Oregon, whatever, please, please, please share that as well, because we want to have a great school year. And I can't believe we're talking about the school year in July, but it's going to be a great school year because school is starting really, really, really soon. For some people here in Texas, we start in August. For you, it may be closer to a September timeframe, but either way, however we can prepare for an excellent school year for our kiddos, I certainly want to be able to support you all in that. So let's connect. Social media, website, email, text, phone call, however you're most comfortable with. Let's connect. And so thank you. As always, I appreciate you all taking the time to listen, taking the time to engage with us. And I realize that we are a new voice here in this space, but I appreciate that you have given us your ears and you've given us your attention. And hopefully the things that we are saying are helpful and motivating, but also practical, that you have actual action steps that you can take and facing based on those decisions that you need to make and really putting them to work for you so that you can see progress as you go. And that's it's part of why we exist, is to help you change the sound of your money. So if your school years feel frantic, your school years feel hectic, your school years feel very, we're not prepared for it, our goal here is to arm you with information, to arm you with encouragement, and to coach you through this so you can change that sound of getting ready for school from frantic to smooth, from disorganized to we have a plan, to I don't know where the money's coming from, to we've planned for this because somebody came alongside of us and said it's going to be okay, you can do it. So we appreciate that here at Studio M. Again, thank you so much for it. I want you to have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, hit us up however you can, social media, Spotify. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, we encourage you to do that as well. And with that, I will say until we meet, keep working on the change. We at Studio M Financial appreciate you for taking time out of your day to listen to us. If you have any comments or questions related to today's content, please feel free to send those our way. The email address is letstalk@studiomfinancial.net, or you can connect with us on social media. If you would like to be notified of future podcasts, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Studio M Financial. As always, until we meet, keep working on the change.